In 1974, when the Swedish Academy announced my Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences, many wondered why someone who had spent decades warning against central planning would receive such recognition. The answer reveals something profound about the nature of economic truth itself. While brilliant minds like Keynes captured the attention of policymakers with promises of controlled prosperity, the Academy recognized that understanding economic reality requires appreciating the limits of human knowledge, not expanding the hubris of human control. This distinction between acknowledging our ignorance and pretending to overcome it represents the fundamental divide in economic thought. Today, as we witness the consequences of decades of activist monetary policy and fiscal intervention, the wisdom embedded in that 1974 decision becomes increasingly clear. The Nobel Committee understood something that eluded many of my contemporaries, that the greatest insights in economics often come not from discovering new ways to control the economy, but from recognizing why such control is impossible. Chapter 1: The Knowledge Problem That Economics Forgot. The fundamental issue that separated my work from Keynes and his followers wasn't about policy preferences, it was about epistemology. During my years developing economic theory, I became increasingly convinced that most economists were asking the wrong questions entirely. They focused on what government should do to manage the economy, when the real question was whether any single mind or institution could possibly possess the knowledge necessary for such management. Consider what economic coordination actually requires. Every day, millions of individuals make decisions about what to produce, what to consume, when to invest, and how to allocate their time and resources. Each decision depends on knowledge that is inherently local, contextual, and constantly changing. The farmer knows when his crops are ready, the entrepreneur senses emerging consumer preferences, the worker understands her own skills and circumstances. This knowledge cannot be collected, aggregated, and processed by any central authority, not because of computational limitations, but because much of it exists only in the minds of acting individuals and emerges only through their market interactions. Keynes approached economics as if this coordination problem could be solved through aggregate management. His focus on macroeconomic variables, total employment, general price levels, aggregate demand, reflected a fundamental misunderstanding of how economic systems actually function. These aggregates are not controllable variables but emergent properties of millions of individual decisions based on dispersed knowledge. The Nobel Committee recognized that my work revealed why economic planning fails not due to bad intentions or insufficient data, but due to the logical impossibility of centralizing knowledge that exists only in dispersed form. This wasn't merely a critique of socialism. It was a recognition that the knowledge problem affects any attempt to substitute centralized decision-making for market coordination. This epistemological insight proved far more durable than Keynesian policy prescriptions because it addressed fundamental questions about the nature of knowledge itself, rather than offering temporary solutions to political problems. Chapter 2: Spontaneous Order versus Designed Systems. While Keynes focused on designing better economic policies, my attention turned to understanding how complex order emerges without design. This distinction proved decisive in establishing the scientific foundations of economics. Keynesian thinking exemplified what I came to call constructivist rationalism, the belief that human reason can design social institutions superior to those that emerge spontaneously. The spontaneous order concept reveals why market economies coordinate effectively without central direction. Prices emerge from countless individual transactions, reflecting local knowledge and changing circumstances. These prices then guide resource allocation more efficiently than any planner could achieve, because they incorporate information that no single mind could possibly possess. Language provides another example. No committee designed English, yet it evolves to meet communication needs more effectively than any constructed language. Keynes never grasped this fundamental distinction between spontaneous order and designed systems. His policies treated the economy as a machine requiring expert operation, rather than recognizing it as a complex adaptive system requiring space to evolve. The multiplier effect, liquidity traps, and other Keynesian concepts assume that aggregate variables can be manipulated to produce predictable results, ignoring how such interventions disrupt the information processing functions of market prices. The Nobel Committee understood that recognizing spontaneous order represents a genuine scientific advance, comparable to understanding biological evolution or ecosystem dynamics. It explained phenomena that constructivist approaches could not: why market economies consistently outperform planned economies, why regulations often produce unintended consequences, why simple rules often work better than complex interventions. This insight proved particularly relevant as economies became more complex and interconnected. While Keynesian policies often worked in the short term by mobilizing unused resources, they systematically undermined the knowledge discovery processes that enable long-term adaptation and growth. The stagflation of the 1970s vindicated this analysis, showing how attempts to fine-tune aggregate variables ultimately disrupted the price signals necessary for economic coordination. The Academy recognized that understanding spontaneous order provides a foundation for economic science that transcends political preferences, explaining both the successes and failures of different institutional arrangements through objective analysis of their information processing capabilities. Chapter 3: The Price System as Information Network. Perhaps my most enduring contribution to economic science was demonstrating how the price system functions as humanity's most sophisticated information processing network. This insight, developed in my 1945 essay, The Use of Knowledge in Society, revealed why central planning fails and why market economies succeed, insights that the Nobel Committee recognized as fundamentally advancing our understanding of economic coordination. Prices perform an information function that no other institution can replicate. When tin becomes scarce in Malaysia, rising tin prices instantly signal this scarcity to users worldwide, encouraging conservation and spurring searches for substitutes, all without any central authority needing to understand the specific causes of scarcity or coordinate responses. This information travels faster than any bureaucracy could process it and reaches every relevant decision-maker simultaneously. Keynes treated prices as variables to be managed rather than information to be preserved. His emphasis on aggregate demand management, wage and price rigidities, and monetary policy effectiveness reflected a fundamental misunderstanding of how prices coordinate knowledge. Keynesian policies systematically distorted price signals through inflation, interest rate manipulation, and fiscal intervention, undermining the very mechanism that enables economic coordination. The beauty of the price system lies in its ability to coordinate the actions of millions of people who need not understand the overall process. A consumer responding to changing prices helps coordinate global resource allocation without needing to understand supply chains, production technologies, or transportation logistics. This coordination occurs through what I called the marvel of the market, the way individual pursuit of personal knowledge and interests contributes to outcomes that serve the general interest. Contemporary observers can witness this principle operating in digital markets, cryptocurrency prices, and global supply chains. When COVID-19 disrupted shipping, price signals immediately began coordinating adjustments, companies shifting to air freight, consumers substituting products, manufacturers relocating production. No central planner could have coordinated these adjustments as quickly or effectively. The Nobel Committee recognized that understanding the informational function of prices provides objective criteria for evaluating economic policies. Policies that preserve and enhance price signals enable coordination, those that distort or suppress prices create discoordination. This insight transcends political ideology, offering scientific grounds for institutional analysis. This recognition of prices as information networks explains why my work proved more durable than Keynesian macroeconomics, it identified fundamental processes rather than temporary political solutions. Chapter 4: The Fatal Conceit of Intellectual Arrogance. The Nobel Committee's decision reflected their recognition that my work identified a fundamental flaw in economic thinking, what I eventually termed the fatal conceit. This conceit manifests as the belief that human intelligence can improve upon the outcomes of spontaneous social processes through conscious design and control. Keynes exemplified this intellectual arrogance, assuming that academic economists could manage aggregate variables better than market processes coordinate individual decisions. During my decades of observation, I noticed how the most intelligent individuals often proved most susceptible to this conceit. Keynes himself was brilliant, there's no denying his intellectual capabilities. But brilliance in theoretical reasoning doesn't translate into ability to manage complex social systems. Indeed, intellectual sophistication often increases confidence in one's ability to improve upon evolutionary processes that embody the accumulated wisdom of countless generations. The fatal conceit manifests in various forms, believing that monetary authorities can fine-tune business cycles, that fiscal policy can stabilize employment, that regulations can improve upon market outcomes, that planners can allocate resources more efficiently than price signals. Each reflects the same fundamental error, assuming that conscious knowledge can substitute for the tacit knowledge embedded in social institutions. Keynes's confidence in activist government policy exemplified this conceit perfectly. His general theory assumed that academic economists could identify market failures and design corrective interventions. But this approach ignored how government interventions disrupt the very information processes that enable markets to coordinate economic activity. Every intervention changes the knowledge environment, creating new problems that require further interventions in an endless cycle of expanding control. The historical record vindicated my warnings about intellectual arrogance. Keynesian demand management contributed to the stagflation crisis of the 1970s. Central banking activism has created boom-bust cycles. Regulatory interventions often produce outcomes opposite to their stated intentions. Each failure demonstrates how conscious design disrupts spontaneous coordination. The Nobel Committee understood that recognizing intellectual limitations represents genuine scientific progress. Just as biology advances by understanding evolutionary processes rather than trying to design better organisms, economics advances by understanding market processes rather than trying to replace them with conscious control. This insight proves increasingly relevant as technological capabilities expand. The availability of big data and artificial intelligence tempts policymakers to believe they can finally achieve the control that previous generations lacked. But computational power cannot overcome the fundamental knowledge problem. It cannot centralize knowledge that exists only in dispersed, contextual form. Chapter 5: Evolution versus Construction in Institutions. The Academy's recognition extended beyond my economic theory to my broader insights about institutional evolution. While Keynes focused on constructing better policies, I explored how effective institutions emerge through evolutionary processes rather than conscious design. This distinction proved crucial for understanding why some societies prosper while others stagnate. Effective institutions, property rights, rule of law, stable currency, contract enforcement, typically emerge through long processes of trial and error, not through deliberate construction. The English common law system developed over centuries through countless individual cases, creating precedents that proved more adaptive than any code designed by legal experts. Similarly, market institutions evolved to solve coordination problems that no individual mind could have anticipated or designed solutions for. Keynes represented the constructivist tradition that assumes human reason can design institutions superior to those that emerge spontaneously. His policy recommendations, active monetary management, fiscal fine-tuning, government intervention in markets, reflected confidence that expert knowledge could improve upon evolutionary outcomes. But this approach consistently underestimated the complexity of social systems and the unintended consequences of institutional intervention. My analysis revealed why evolutionary institutions often outperform designed ones. Evolutionary processes subject institutions to constant testing against reality, preserving those that prove effective while allowing unsuccessful ones to disappear. Designed institutions, no matter how brilliant their creators, cannot anticipate all the circumstances they will face or incorporate all the knowledge that evolutionary processes accumulate over time. Consider monetary systems. Gold standards emerged spontaneously as traders sought reliable stores of value and mediums of exchange. Central banking, by contrast, represents conscious institutional design aimed at improving upon spontaneous monetary order. Yet central banks have proven consistently unable to maintain monetary stability, creating boom-bust cycles that precious metal standards avoided. The Nobel Committee recognized that understanding institutional evolution provides scientific foundations for comparative institutional analysis. Rather than evaluating institutions based on theoretical ideals, we can assess them based on their adaptive capacity and their ability to coordinate complex social cooperation without conscious direction. This evolutionary perspective explains why societies with extensive spontaneous institutions, strong property rights, competitive markets, limited government, consistently outperform those dominated by designed institutions. The difference lies not in the intelligence of their designers but in the knowledge processing capabilities of evolutionary versus constructivist systems. Contemporary examples abound: Bitcoin emerging as a spontaneous monetary alternative, Wikipedia developing as an evolutionary knowledge system, entrepreneurial ecosystems arising organically in certain regions while failing despite massive government investment in others. Chapter 6: Individual Liberty and Economic Coordination. The Nobel Committee's recognition acknowledged that my work demonstrated the essential connection between individual liberty and effective economic coordination. This insight proved particularly significant because it transcended the traditional left-right political spectrum, showing how freedom serves functional rather than merely moral purposes. Keynes never understood this connection, treating individual liberty as potentially conflicting with economic efficiency rather than recognizing it as the foundation of coordinated social cooperation. Individual liberty enables the knowledge discovery processes that make economic coordination possible. When individuals are free to act on their local knowledge, to experiment with new approaches, to respond to price signals, and to form voluntary associations, they participate in a vast discovery process that continuously adapts economic activity to changing circumstances. This discovery requires freedom, the ability to act on one's knowledge without seeking permission from central authorities. Keynes's approach systematically undermined this discovery process by substituting expert judgment for individual choice. Monetary policy manipulates interest rates that would otherwise reflect individual time preferences and investment opportunities. Fiscal policy redirects resources from uses chosen by individuals to uses chosen by politicians and bureaucrats. Regulatory policy restricts the ability of individuals to experiment with new arrangements that might prove superior to existing ones. The connection between liberty and coordination explains why free societies consistently achieve higher living standards than controlled ones. Freedom doesn't guarantee optimal outcomes, it enables discovery processes that continuously move toward better coordination. When individuals are free to pursue their own knowledge and interests, their actions generate price signals that guide resource allocation more effectively than any planner could achieve. This insight proved particularly relevant during the Cold War period when I received the Nobel Prize. The systematic failure of centrally planned economies vindicated my analysis of the knowledge problem and the essential role of individual liberty in economic coordination. Soviet planners possessed impressive technical knowledge and sincere intentions, but they could not replicate the information processing capabilities of free markets. The Academy recognized that understanding the functional role of liberty provides objective grounds for institutional evaluation. Institutions that expand individual choice and voluntary cooperation enable better coordination. Those that restrict freedom undermine coordination regardless of their stated purposes. This criterion transcends political preferences, offering scientific basis for constitutional design. Contemporary applications confirm this analysis. Countries with greater economic freedom consistently achieve better outcomes across multiple measures: growth, innovation, living standards, environmental quality, social mobility. Digital technologies have expanded the possibilities for voluntary coordination while exposing the limitations of regulatory control, further validating the connection between liberty and effective coordination. My Nobel Prize recognized that defending liberty requires more than moral arguments. It requires understanding how freedom enables the knowledge processes that make prosperous societies possible. Chapter 7: Contemporary Vindication of Austrian Insights. The decades following my Nobel Prize have provided remarkable vindication of the insights that the Academy recognized in 1974. Contemporary economic developments, from the failures of central planning to the emergence of digital economies, continue to demonstrate the superiority of spontaneous coordination over conscious control. These developments prove that the Academy's decision reflected not merely theoretical preferences but recognition of enduring truths about economic coordination. The collapse of the Soviet Union provided the most dramatic confirmation of my analysis. Despite possessing vast resources, advanced technology, and dedicated planners, centrally planned economies could not match the coordination achieved by market systems. The knowledge problem proved insurmountable. Planners simply could not access and process the information necessary for effective resource allocation. This failure vindicated my decades of arguing that economic coordination requires spontaneous processes, not conscious design. The digital revolution offers particularly striking examples of spontaneous order. The Internet emerged without central planning, evolving through countless individual innovations and voluntary adoptions. Wikipedia coordinates global knowledge production without hierarchical control. Open-source software projects achieve coordination that rivals or exceeds centrally managed alternatives. These examples demonstrate how complex coordination emerges naturally when individuals are free to act on their knowledge. Cryptocurrency represents perhaps the most remarkable contemporary vindication of my monetary theory. Bitcoin emerged spontaneously as individuals sought alternatives to government-controlled currencies, evolving through market processes rather than expert design. Its success demonstrates how monetary institutions can emerge without central authority, precisely the insight that my monetary theory provided decades before the necessary technology existed. The 2008 financial crisis further validated my warnings about central banking activism. Decades of monetary manipulation created the very boom-bust cycle that Austrian theory predicted. Central banks' attempts to fine-tune economic activity through interest rate control systematically distorted price signals, leading to malinvestment and eventual collapse. The crisis demonstrated how conscious monetary management undermines the coordination that natural interest rates would provide. Contemporary policy debates increasingly reflect the insights that earned my Nobel recognition. Discussions about regulatory capture, unintended consequences, and the limitations of government intervention echo my analysis of the knowledge problem. Even mainstream economists now acknowledge that market processes often prove superior to expert management, though they haven't fully grasped the epistemological foundations of this superiority. The emergence of prediction markets, algorithmic trading, and decentralized autonomous organizations continues to demonstrate how spontaneous coordination can solve problems that conscious design cannot address. These innovations arise from individual creativity and voluntary cooperation, not from expert planning or government mandate. The Nobel Committee's decision appears increasingly prescient as we witness the ongoing failures of conscious economic management and the continued success of spontaneous coordination mechanisms across diverse domains. Conclusion. The Nobel Committee's decision in 1974 recognized more than economic theory. It acknowledged fundamental truths about knowledge, coordination, and human society. While Keynes offered politicians attractive promises of control, my work revealed why such control remains impossible regardless of good intentions or sophisticated techniques. The Academy understood that progress in economic science requires recognizing our epistemic limitations rather than expanding our hubris about managing complex systems. The decades since have vindicated this recognition repeatedly. Every attempt to substitute conscious design for spontaneous coordination has failed, while market processes continue to coordinate increasingly complex global cooperation. From the collapse of central planning to the emergence of digital economies, reality confirms that understanding our knowledge limitations provides better foundation for policy than assuming our ability to transcend them. The Nobel Prize honored insights that remain as relevant today as when first developed, perhaps more so as technological capabilities tempt new generations of planners to believe they can achieve the control that their predecessors lacked. The fundamental truth remains: prosperity emerges through freedom and spontaneous coordination, not through expert management and conscious control.